Right in the heart of the police station lobby, Monica Lane stood trembling, just before a uniformed officer's fist smashed into her face. Blood dripped from her mouth. But Monica wasn't just another victim. She was an undercover internal affairs agent sent to expose deep-rooted racism inside the department. The man who hit her had no idea he had just attacked the very person investigating him. What happens when power meets truth? What dark secrets will her investigation reveal? Subscribe now, because this story of courage, racism, and justice is only just beginning. The blow to Monica Lane's face wasn't just a punch. It was a message. Her cheek throbbed. Her vision blurred. Her mind spun, but one thing remained clear. She had to get out. Blood trickled from her mouth, but she didn't wipe it. She needed her hands free. The moment Officer Miller screamed that she had attacked him, she knew the game had changed. Monica turned, stumbling toward the exit, her heartbeat loud in her ears. A second officer blocked the path, arms raised. "Stop right there!" he shouted, stepping in front of the glass doors. Monica froze, breath sharp in her throat. She looked around. No one moved to help. A receptionist stood stunned. Two other officers whispered near the hallway, unsure whether to intervene, and Miller, still behind the desk, pointed like a madman, yelling, "She tried to assault me! She's dangerous! Stop her!" Just dangerous. Because of her skin, because of her challenge to their control, because she didn't bow. Monica raised her hands, slowly, trembling. "I'm leaving. I don't want trouble," she said, her voice cracked, but steady. But the second officer reached for his holster. Her eyes widened. Was he really going to draw a weapon on her? "I'm with Internal Affairs," she said, louder now, trying to reach someone, anyone with sense. "Let me show you my badge. I was sent here. I didn't attack him. He hit me." Her voice trembled slightly, but the truth held it upright. But the man didn't lower his hand. Instead, he stepped closer. "On the ground," he barked. "Hands behind your head." She hesitated, eyes searching the room again for any sign of help. One officer near the hallway seemed to twitch, uncertain. Monica decided. Slowly, painfully, she knelt, her face burning, her legs weak, blood still sliding from her mouth. The officer approached, handcuffs ready. "You're making a mistake," Monica whispered. "I'm Agent Monica Lane, badge 784. Look in the system. Check the IA alerts, please." But no one did. Instead, cold metal locked around her wrists. Pain radiated from her shoulder. She winced but stayed still. Behind her, Miller's voice was louder now. "She came in here screaming. I tried to calm her down. Then she jumped the counter. I had no choice." Monica bit her lip. Monica tried again. "Check the security cameras," she said, her voice sharper now. "They saw it all. You'll see who attacked who." The officer paused briefly, but said nothing. They led her down a hallway, each step echoing. Her knees were shaking, not just from pain, but from something deeper. Betrayal. This wasn't just one bad cop. It was a system that had made room for him, protected him, fed his hate, and ignored every warning sign. They placed her in a small holding room. She sat quietly, cuffed to a metal bench. Her hidden microphone had sent out the emergency signal. She knew that. But how long until backup arrived? Minutes passed like hours. Then, and two men in plain clothes entered. Her team. Relief flooded her. The taller one, Agent Cole, looked at her with wide eyes. "Jesus, Monica," he said, moving quickly to uncuff her. "We got the signal. We saw the punch on camera. It's all there." The other agent was already pulling out his phone, making calls. "Get command. Lock down the lobby. Secure the footage. And bring Miller in, Now. Monica exhaled, slowly. The nightmare wasn't over, but now she had backup. Now she had witnesses. Now, maybe, someone would listen. Within the hour, everything changed. The video from the security system was pulled. Her recording was played aloud. Miller's words, vile, racist, violent, were heard by senior officers, IA officials, and eventually the district attorney. The truth was no longer just hers. It was recorded, time-stamped, undeniable. Miller was arrested, red-faced, still shouting about lies. But this time, no one believed him. The department's silence cracked. Old complaints resurfaced. Victims from years ago stepped forward, trembling but brave. The media picked up the story. Headlines blazed. Internal Affairs agent assaulted by officer during investigation. The city shook. But Monica didn't care about the headlines. She cared about what came next. The reforms. The reckoning. The long-delayed justice. She sat quietly in a hospital room that night, a bandage on her face, her heart still heavy. She had failed to escape the moment, but she had not failed her mission. She had exposed a darkness that could no longer hide, and for every person who had ever been ignored, doubted, or silenced, she had spoken back. Subscribe to this channel if this story moved you. Tomorrow, another story, another voice, another truth that needs to be told. Don't miss it. The department had no choice but to suspend Officer Frank Miller immediately after the footage emerged. But even in disgrace, he had allies. Officers who whispered about Monica behind closed doors, who suggested maybe she provoked it, who said things like, "We don't know what really happened before the camera rolled," and "she was probably baiting him." Her badge was real. Her wounds were real. But some still chose to see her as a problem, not a professional. Some colleagues stopped returning her calls. Others offered hollow smiles in public, only to step aside in silence when she walked past. The air around her grew colder, heavier, and lonelier by the day. Monica tried to focus on the case, on the dozens of reopened complaints, the statements from Miller's past victims, the documents that now showed a clear pattern of cover-ups. But even that was a battlefield. Every file she reviewed brought another story of pain. A teenage boy who'd been cuffed for mouthing off, a mother pushed to the ground in front of her children during a traffic stop, a homeless man bruised and silenced after resisting questioning. And each time she opened a folder, she found one common thread: Miller's name, scribbled in bad handwriting and protected by bad leadership. Monica was determined to bring justice for those people, but it came at a cost. Sleep was no longer peaceful. She'd wake up sweating, replaying the moment that punch landed. Her therapist called it trauma. She called it memory. The way the whole lobby had gone silent, the metallic taste of blood, the stunned faces that did nothing. She couldn't shake it. And at work, it felt worse. She'd been told to stay strong, to stay focused. But every hallway felt colder now. Some officers refused to look at her. Others muttered under their breath. A few even filed complaints accusing her of violating procedure during the undercover mission. One day, she walked into the locker room to find the word snitch scrawled in red marker on her locker door. Another day, her tires were slashed in the parking lot. The department opened an internal inquiry, but no one was ever caught. She began eating lunch in her car. She parked away from the main building. She stopped sharing information unless necessary. It was like walking through fog while knives hovered at every turn. And still she kept going. For the boy. For the mother. For the voiceless names on forgotten reports. When the trial for Frank Miller began, Monica was asked to testify. She said yes, of course. She had lived the evidence. But sitting in that courtroom, facing the man who had attacked her, wasn't justice. It was a raw return to the moment of trauma. Miller sat in his orange jumpsuit, looking small now. But when his eyes met hers, there was no remorse, only quiet fury. His lawyer argued stress, said Miller had been pushed to the edge, that Monica's presence was confusing, deceptive, that it was entrapment. Monica sat on the stand and recounted the moment. Her voice didn't shake, but her hands were cold the entire time. When she stepped off the witness stand, there were cameras waiting outside. A reporter shouted, "How does it feel to see him in handcuffs?" Monica didn't answer. She just walked, steady and silent, past the questions. Because the truth was, she didn't feel relief. Not yet. Justice wasn't a verdict. It was what came after. And what came next wasn't relief. It was more attacks. Online articles surfaced digging into her past. Blogs twisted her words. Commenters accused her of ruining a good cop's life. They said she was a plant, that she had lied, that she had faked the hit. The footage was there. The blood. The witnesses. But they didn't care. Monica was black. A woman. And in their eyes, that meant she must have done something wrong. One night, someone left a dead bird on her porch. Another time, her younger sister's car was broken into. Nothing stolen, just the glove box torn open and a photo of Monica from her graduation ripped in half and left on the seat. That one hurt the most. Her sister had nothing to do with this. She was a nurse. A mother. Monica wanted to protect her. But now the storm was spilling into her family's life. Still, Monica showed up. Every day. She gathered the files. She gave voice to victims. She testified again and again. She sat with the DA. She talked with community leaders. She stood in front of crowds of protesters and told them the truth. Not the headline. Not the camera-ready version. The real one. That fighting racism inside the system was like digging through concrete with your fingernails. That sometimes justice cost you your peace, your friends, your safety. And still, it was worth it. Because the alternative was silence. And silence had never saved anyone. When the jury returned the guilty verdict on all charges, there was a wave of applause. Reporters rushed out of the courtroom to file their stories. Monica sat still, her hands folded in her lap. It was done. But not really. Because for every Frank Miller behind a desk, there were 10 more watching. Waiting. Wearing smiles that didn't reach their eyes. And Monica knew they weren't afraid of punishment. They were afraid of exposure. After the trial, the department was forced to make sweeping changes. New oversight rules. Stricter complaint review procedures. Mandatory bias training. Miller's victims were given apologies, settlements, and, in some cases, reinstatement of dismissed complaints. The public saw change. But inside, Monica saw the cracks still running deep. Months later, her supervisor offered her a promotion. A new title. A higher desk. Monica turned it down. She didn't want a new office. She wanted real accountability. She asked for something else instead. Access to the department's full misconduct archives. She wanted to build something permanent. A unit that didn't just investigate abuse after it happened, but prevented it before it could. They told her it was impossible. She told them to watch her. Every scar on her face, every moment of silence from her coworkers, every threat on her voicemail had taught her one thing. You cannot be afraid to stand in the fire if you want to change the system that built it. Monica still walks the halls of the department, still wears the badge, but she wears it differently now. Not as a shield, but as a promise. A promise that she will never back down. That she will listen to every ignored voice, fight for every overlooked victim, and stand in the way of every officer who believes the uniform makes them untouchable. And to every person watching this story unfold, to everyone who's ever doubted their power to fight back, remember this: Monica Lane was just one woman, walking into a station, pretending to be weak, only to prove stronger than an entire broken system. Thank you for listening. If Monica's story moved you, please click like, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Tomorrow, another real story. Another voice that needs to be heard. Don't miss it. Monica Lane had won the battle, but the war was still clawing at her heels. After everything, the punch, the courtroom testimony, the threats, the betrayals, most people would have taken time to heal. But Monica didn't. She couldn't. The city was still trembling from the shock of what happened, and while the headlines faded, the wounds didn't. Not for her. Every time she stepped into that police department, her breath slowed, her heart tightened, her jaw clenched just slightly, because she knew. She knew the stares hadn't stopped. She knew the silence in meetings wasn't respect, it was resistance. And still, she walked through those double-glass doors every morning with her back straight and her head high, daring anyone to meet her eyes. But even strength has its cracks. Even warriors bleed behind closed doors. Late one night, Monica sat alone in her apartment, her lights off, a single desk lamp glowing above a pile of old case files. She'd requested every dismissed complaint from the past 10 years, and slowly she was building a map of pain, a map of names. And it was horrifying. Some stories were almost identical. People of color stopped for no reason, humiliated in public, pushed, insulted, threatened, then left with nothing but fear and silence, their words ignored, their truth buried. Monica read until her eyes blurred, tears welling behind her lashes, not from weakness, but from a kind of grief that sits heavy in the soul. That night, she called one of the victims, a woman named Marlene, now 63, who had filed a complaint against Frank Miller 17 years ago. "He yanked me out of my car," Marlene said softly, her voice shaking through the phone. "In front of my kids. He said I was suspicious because I looked too calm. I told them, but no one believed me." Monica's throat tightened. "I believe you," she whispered. It was moments like this that kept her going. Not the media, not the awards or interviews, just those words. "I believe you." They were the beginning of healing. And Monica wanted every single person whose pain had been ignored to hear them. But the pressure was mounting. After the verdict, rumors swirled that some officers were planning to resign in protest of the witch hunt. Some called it revenge, others betrayal. Monica was called everything from a hero to a traitor, but none of that mattered to her. Not really. What hurt most was the coldness. The way some of her own colleagues, people she had trained with, laughed with, even trusted, now acted like she was a virus. Something dangerous, something to avoid. She'd walk into the break room and conversations would die mid-sentence. She'd send emails requesting updates, and they'd go unanswered. Some officers left notes on her desk saying she was ruining the family. Family. That word echoed in her mind. Was it family when they stayed silent while one of their own abused the community? Was it family when they looked away as a fellow officer punched her in the face? Monica had no time for that kind of family. She focused on her new project, what she called the Integrity Circle, and a group of officers, community leaders, and internal affairs investigators who would meet monthly to review old complaints, hear from civilians, and make policy suggestions. At first, she was laughed at. A circle? In this department? But she kept pushing. She found allies. She built trust. And slowly, one voice turned into 3, then 5, then 10. The first public forum they held was tense, but it was real. Victims came forward. They cried. They shouted. Some just sat quietly, grateful someone finally listened. One night, after the third forum, Monica walked to her car and found a folded note on her windshield. Her heart jumped, bracing for another threat, but when she opened it, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. "Thank you. You helped me believe I matter." Jason, age 16. She leaned against the car and wept quietly. In that moment, every scar, every threat, every insult was worth it. But the darkness hadn't given up. One evening, her apartment building was vandalized. Slurs sprayed across her door. The number 784 circled in red, the number from her IA badge. It was personal. Whoever did it wanted her to feel hunted. Unsafe. She stared at the red paint for a long time, then calmly took out her phone, snapped a photo, and filed the report. No fear in her steps, just resolve. The department offered her protection. She refused it. "I don't want to hide," she said. "If they want to see what accountability looks like, let them look me in the eye." Even through all this, Monica didn't stop. She visited schools, talked to students about justice. She met with families whose loved ones had suffered and helped them reopen old cases. She showed up at city council meetings, speaking firmly, never shouting, always with facts and faces behind her. And every time she stood up, the room went quiet. Not because of fear, but because of something rarer. Respect earned the hard way. Still, the emotional toll grew heavier. She hadn't seen her father in weeks. They used to talk every Sunday, but he had grown quiet. "I don't want you getting hurt," he'd told her. "You already gave enough. Maybe it's time to stop." But Monica couldn't stop. Not now. Not when so many still lived in fear. Not when children grew up learning to distrust those sworn to protect them. Not when the voices of pain still echoed unanswered in case files stacked on forgotten shelves. So, she kept going. But she was human. Some nights the weight pressed down so hard she could barely breathe. She'd sit on the edge of her bed, gripping the edge of the mattress, just trying to stay upright. The image of Miller's punch still haunted her. But worse than the punch was the silence that followed. The few seconds where no one moved. No one helped. That silence, she realized, was the sound of complicity. And it was the sound she vowed to destroy, one story at a time. And this is one of them. You're hearing Monica's story because someone needs to. Because the fight against racism and corruption doesn't end with headlines. It ends with awareness, with action, with people like you. Monica Lane didn't ask to be a symbol. She didn't ask for violence or fame. All she wanted was a fair system. She wanted her badge to mean something. But when that badge was no longer enough to protect her from a fellow officer's fist, she made a choice. Not to walk away, but to dig in deeper. To uncover every lie. To light up every corner of darkness. To make the system bleed truth until it could no longer deny its own shame. And now, even after the verdict, she continues. Not because she has to, but because she must. She walks alone sometimes, but she walks with purpose, with courage, with the stories of so many others who couldn't fight back, but now know they aren't alone. And if you felt anything, while hearing her story, if her pain reached your heart, if her bravery stirred something in you, then do one thing right now. Press the like button, not just for Monica, but for every person like her. For every person who stood up and got knocked down. For every person whose voice was stolen and needs to know someone, somewhere, is still listening. Click like to let Monica know her fight wasn't in vain. Comment to tell her she's not alone. And subscribe to this channel because more stories like this need to be heard, and we're not stopping here. Tomorrow, we share another voice, another truth, another story that matters. But today is for Monica Lane, the one who stood up and never sat back down. Everyone thought Monica Lane's story ended in the courtroom. They thought the trial, the guilty verdict, and the public reforms were the climax. But they didn't know Monica. They didn't know that while most people closed the book on Officer Frank Miller's case, she was quietly opening a new one filled with sealed records, missing reports, and something much darker than anyone expected. Because Monica hadn't stopped at justice. She had started digging deeper, beneath Miller's past, beneath the department's secrets. And what she found didn't just shake her, it terrified her. There were files that didn't make sense, names that kept appearing in redacted cases, complaints that vanished after being filed, and officers who resigned quietly after allegations that never made the news. It was like someone had erased entire stories, like ghosts of justice buried under layers of official lies. And Monica wasn't about to let it stay that way. She started following leads in her free time. Not officially, not as an agent, but as herself. A woman who had survived the system and refused to let others fall into it blind. She met a former detective, off the record, who had been forced into early retirement. He slid a box across the table. Inside were dozens of complaint reports marked, "Closed with no action taken." Some of them were incomplete. Others were missing pages. "They told me to stop asking questions," he said, his voice low. "Now, I'm telling you to start." What Monica discovered next shocked even her. There were whistleblowers, officers who had tried to speak up years ago but were transferred or demoted or fired under vague performance reviews. A paper trail of internal emails, coded, evasive, suggested that a senior group within the department had created a system of suppressing complaints they deemed damaging to morale. Victims had been told their stories didn't meet criteria. Supervisors altered dates. Some files had completely disappeared from the digital system. Only physical backups survived, often misfiled or mislabeled. And then there were the disappearances. One woman, Maria Alvarez, had filed 5 reports over 4 years against multiple officers harassing her son. Then, she vanished. No forwarding address. Her phone disconnected. No missing persons report. Monica found an old neighbor who said, she moved after some men came around asking questions, looked official, but she was scared. Another man, Darius Monroe, had filed a brutal excessive force complaint after being hospitalized, then was arrested 6 months later for a charge that didn't even exist in the criminal code. His public defender dropped off the case. Darius pled guilty to avoid more time. Monica started asking, how many of these stories ended not in justice, but in silence? And one night, Monica did something no one expected. She broke into her own building. Not the office, not her department. She slipped into the evidence archive vault at a neighboring precinct, the one rumored to hold the sealed files. It was dangerous, illegal. But Monica wasn't wearing a badge that night. She was wearing something more powerful. Purpose. The kind born from too many stories left untold. The place was dark. A single guard rotated every 30 minutes. She timed it, waited for the silence between footsteps. She'd studied the layout months ago. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed in the stolen code she'd found on an old memo buried in an unrelated case file. The door opened. Inside, rows of metal shelves, dozens of boxes. No labels, just numbers. But Monica had memorized one. Case 11493B. She found it on the third row, pulled it down, opened the dusty lid, and froze. Inside were photos, hundreds of them. Some dated back over a decade. People bloodied, bruised, terrified, names scribbled on the back, reports marked unsubstantiated, officer names redacted in heavy black ink. But some reports had never been sealed fully. Miller's name appeared, then another, and another. And then, Miller plus 2, a triangle, a pattern, a team. It wasn't just one corrupt officer. It was a ring. And they weren't just violent. They were organized. They shared case notes. They rotated victims. They cross-signed complaints to clear each other. There were hints of something even more sinister, like payments made to community informants for silence. Monica's pulse pounded in her ears. This wasn't about one rogue cop. This was about an invisible syndicate inside the force that had survived for years, unchecked. She stuffed what she could into her bag, snapped pictures of the rest. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Not the guard. Different shoes. Heavier. She hid. Breath held. The vault door creaked. A flashlight flickered. A voice muttered. "She's been here." She stayed still, her hand clenched over her mouth. She waited 15 minutes. Then bolted, through the emergency exit, across the lot, back into her car, heart slamming like a war drum. The next morning, her apartment was ransacked. Nothing stolen. Just torn. Ripped files. Broken frame. A note stuck to her wall with a knife. "You went too far." Monica didn't flinch. She called no one. She cleaned up the room, bandaged her shaking hands, and got back to work. She copied the photos to a flash drive, mailed them to 3 news outlets anonymously. Then she prepared her report, not for internal review, but for a federal agent she trusted. One who had helped with organized crime cases before. He called her 2 days later. His voice was tight. "This isn't just internal corruption," he said. "This might be racketeering, civil rights violations, abuse of process. We're opening a formal inquiry, but you need to be careful. You're in deeper than you realize." Monica had realized it the moment the punch landed in the lobby months ago, and now she was running toward the fire, not away. She gave statements to federal investigators. She met with activists behind closed doors. She started compiling a public dossier. And when a local reporter reached out with her own suspicions about the 3, the officers working with Miller, Monica handed over everything. Not for the spotlight, but for protection. Once it's public, they couldn't erase it, couldn't bury it, couldn't pretend it never happened. But then, the threats became more dangerous. A car followed her home one night, its headlights off. Another time, someone tried to break into her office after hours. Nothing stolen. Just her personal files opened, moved, shifted slightly, like someone wanted her to know they were watching. She had backup now. People on the inside who supported her. But even that wasn't enough. One of her contacts, a young officer who had been helping her collect missing reports, disappeared for 3 days. When he returned, he refused to talk, eyes hollow, face pale. "They said they'd ruin me," he whispered. "They know everything. My family, my records, my past. I can't help you anymore." Monica nodded. She didn't ask for more. She just hugged him and said, "Thank you for trying." But that night, she stayed up writing. Not notes, not memos. Her story, in case anything happened. In case she disappeared. And now you're hearing it. Because the people she's fighting don't want you to. You're hearing Monica's voice because she refused to be silenced. She risked everything, her career, her life, her safety, not for herself, but for others. For victims no one believed. for families broken by cover-ups, for a system that's been rotting from the inside for years. And now she needs you. Because if you're listening, you're part of this story now. Comment below to let Monica know she's not alone. Tell her to keep going. Tell her she's brave. Tell her the world is watching and won't look away this time. Monica Lane didn't just uncover injustice. She stepped into the shadows and dragged it into the light. But her mission isn't over. The ring is still out there. The lies are still protected. And the next steps will be even more dangerous. So we ask you, what would you do in Monica's shoes? Would you keep going? Would you stay silent? Or would you rise? Drop a comment, encourage her, show her she's not fighting alone. Because sometimes all a hero needs is to know someone is still listening. And we're listening, Monica. We're with you. And we'll be here until the whole truth comes out. Stay tuned for tomorrow's story. It's time more people start paying attention. You've heard the headlines. You've seen the footage. Maybe you even read the name Monica Lane and thought she was just another brave officer who stood up to corruption. But you don't know the half of it, because the truth, the real truth, is far more painful, far more powerful, and far more human than a headline can carry. Monica didn't just uncover one dirty cop. She exposed a system. And to do that, she had to walk through fire. She had to risk everything. Her badge, her body, her soul. It started with one punch in a police station lobby. That's what the world saw. A white officer, filled with rage and racism, struck a black woman across the face, blood spilling under fluorescent lights. But what the world didn't see was everything that led up to that moment. The whispers Monica had heard for months, the complaints buried, the silence that wrapped itself around every report like a noose. The way Officer Frank Miller looked at people who didn't look like him. How he smirked when a black teenager cried. How he rolled his eyes when an immigrant woman begged for help. Monica saw it all. And for a long time, she had to stay silent. Because she was an internal affairs agent, planted undercover, sent to investigate him. And she knew, if she spoke too soon, it would all vanish. The truth would slip through their fingers. So she disguised herself, became Sarah Jenkins, a tired, poor black woman with a missing wallet. She walked into that station knowing she might be dismissed, maybe disrespected. She didn't expect to be punched in the face, but she didn't back down. Even as the world spun, even as her jaw swelled and the blood pooled at her lips, even as her heart pounded with the sharp realization that she was alone, and the man standing over her had power. Real power. And he had just abused it in broad daylight. What happened next changed everything. She revealed herself, her true name, her true badge. And for a split second, silence fell like thunder across the room. Miller froze. His face turned white. The man who thought he had just assaulted a helpless woman had unknowingly struck the very person sent to destroy his career. That moment made national headlines. But what came after? What Monica endured? That is the story you haven't heard. Because exposing one man didn't fix the system. It just pulled back the curtain. And when the curtain fell, Monica stepped into something far bigger than herself. She discovered a network of buried reports, mysteriously vanished complaints, and officers working together to erase accountability. A dark brotherhood of silence that protected one another while the people they were meant to serve bled and cried in the streets. And when Monica tried to shine a light on that shadowy network, they came for her. The racism she had experienced before, cold stares, quiet disrespect, being spoken over in meetings, turned into something more dangerous. Co-workers who used to smile walked past her without a glance. Some muttered that she was making them all look bad. Others whispered the word traitor. One day, someone scratched snitch into the side of her car. Another day, she opened her locker to find a photo of herself ripped in half, a red X across her face. But Monica kept going, because every time she felt fear, she remembered the people who never got justice. She remembered the woman who had been pulled over 5 times in a single month by the same officers and told to go back to where you came from. She remembered the teenage boy who was slammed against a wall because he fit the description, and the elderly black man who had been called a street animal by an officer sworn to protect him. Monica carried their stories like armor. But then came the moment that changed everything, again. She found a box, a sealed archive, a file that was never supposed to see daylight. It detailed not just one corrupt officer, but a group, a team. Names she recognized, and photos. Photos of bruised faces, torn clothes, eyes filled with fear, victims who had no voice. Monica knew she had found the truth. And then came the risk. She had to get that file out. But the only copy existed inside a precinct evidence vault. So Monica made a choice. She risked everything. Late one night, she broke in. Not to steal, but to reveal. To bring light where there had only been shadows. She used a borrowed access code, wore gloves, counted steps. She knew she had maybe 10 minutes before someone noticed. She found the box, snapped photos, took documents. But as she turned to leave, she heard it. Footsteps. Not a guard. Not a friend. Someone who had been watching. She froze. Breath shallow. Her heart pounded in her ears. The vault door creaked. She ducked behind a shelf. Listened. A flashlight beam passed inches from her face. A voice whispered something that chilled her blood. She's been here. They knew. She waited 10 more minutes before escaping through the rear exit, running breathless across the lot, adrenaline screaming through her veins. When she got home, she knew the danger wasn't over. And she was right. The next morning, her door had been kicked in. Nothing was stolen. Just broken. Papers shredded. A message knifed into the wall. You went too far. Monica didn't cry. She didn't run. She gathered the files, made 3 copies, and sent them to federal agencies and trusted journalists, because if anything happened to her, the truth would still live. That's the part the world didn't see. Not just the punch. Not just the trial. The risk. The escape, the sacrifice. Because when Monica sat on that witness stand, she didn't just speak for herself. She spoke for every person whose story had been erased. Every person who had been told their pain wasn't real. Every person who had been denied justice because their skin was brown, or their accent was foreign, or their wallet was empty. When she testified, the courtroom went silent. She spoke clearly, powerfully. She didn't cry. But others did. The jury found Miller guilty. But the true victory was bigger than the verdict. Because of Monica, a federal task force opened a wide-scale investigation. 2 other officers in the secret network were arrested. A dozen buried complaints were re-examined. Families were called. Victims were found. The system began to bend. Not break, but bend, under the weight of her courage. And through it all, Monica never asked for praise. She never stood in front of cameras to take credit. She went home. She made tea. She opened more case files. Because that's who she is. Not a hero in a cape. Not a name for headlines. Just a woman who refused to stay quiet. A black woman who turned her pain into power. A survivor who looked racism in the eye and said, "Not today. Not again." And now you know the full story. Now you understand what it cost her. From the moment a racist officer struck her in the face, to the moment she broke into a building to reveal the truth. From the isolation, the threats, the fear, to the files, the whispers, the silence, to the trial, the verdict, and the justice she never thought she'd live to see. This was her journey. This is Monica Lane. And now it's your turn. If this story moved you, if your heart broke, if your fists clenched, if you felt anything while hearing what Monica endured, press the like button. Do it to show that her pain mattered. Do it to remind the world that justice is worth fighting for. Do it so Monica knows we are still listening. And drop a comment. Tell Monica she's not alone. Tell her that everything she risked was not in vain. Tell her the fight she started still matters, because it does. Like, comment, subscribe. Tomorrow, we share another story. But today belongs to Monica, to her courage, to her truth, to her escape from the darkness. She didn't just survive it. She turned it into light. There's a moment when pain turns into power, but only after you've walked through hell. Monica Lane knows that moment well, because behind her name, behind the quiet strength and sharp eyes, lies a story most people would never survive. It began with a punch, sure, one thrown in the middle of a cold police station lobby. But that wasn't the beginning. That was only the spark. The truth goes much deeper, to a place soaked in silence, racism, and danger. And if you've followed her story this far, you deserve to know the full weight of what she's endured, what she risked, what she survived, and what nearly destroyed her. Monica was an internal affairs agent, planted undercover to investigate Officer Frank Miller, a man with a long trail of whispers behind him. Whispers of abuse, of racism, of cruelty, of reports filed and buried, of citizens ignored, insulted, and injured. She knew this wouldn't be easy. She knew she'd be treated poorly, maybe even harassed, but she never expected to be assaulted. Not like that. Not with a fist to her face and blood dripping in front of witnesses who said nothing. That moment, the sting of skin on skin, the gasp of disbelief, the fire in her jaw, wasn't just an attack. It was a revelation. And as she staggered back that day, clutching her aching cheek, she realized, this is what it feels like to be invisible in the eyes of the very system sworn to protect you. And yet, she didn't break. She revealed her identity, her badge, her mission. And Frank Miller's world came crashing down. But that's where most people thought it ended. That's what the public saw. Justice served. A villain exposed. But what they didn't see was what Monica faced next. Because justice has a price. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Officers stared at her in the halls. Not with respect, but with resentment. Coworkers stopped returning her calls. Whispers followed her like shadows. She was called a traitor, a backstabber, a disgrace to the badge. They didn't see her as brave. They saw her as a threat. And every step she took inside that building felt colder than the last. She'd walk into the break room and conversations would halt. She'd pass someone in the hallway and see them clutching their phones a little tighter, turning away. But Monica kept going. Even when they scratched the word rat onto her locker. Even when someone left a dead rat on her windshield, its mouth stuffed with her own printed photo. She filed the reports. None of them led to answers. Just silence. She started eating lunch in her car. She stopped smiling at work. She kept her head down and her voice steady, even as her hands trembled at night alone in her apartment. The nightmares came next. She'd wake up gasping, sweating, reliving that moment. The punch, the lies, the way Miller tried to claim she'd attacked him, the sound of her own silence echoing back at her. Sometimes, she'd sit up in bed and cry without a sound, holding a pillow against her face so the neighbors wouldn't hear. Because she wasn't just carrying her own pain. She was carrying everyone else's too. Every victim who'd come before her, whose voice had been ignored, whose case had been closed, whose trauma had been filed under unsubstantiated. And then came the files, boxes of old complaints, quietly sent to her by a retired officer who'd once tried to speak up but had been forced out. Monica read through them for days, and her heart broke again and again. A black high school student who was handcuffed for walking too confidently. A Latino man beaten during a traffic stop. A single mother accused of lying when she said her child had been shoved by a white officer. Their names were forgotten, their pain erased. But now Monica held it all in her hands, and it burned. She knew she had to dig deeper, but digging meant risk. That's when she did something most agents would never even dream of. She broke into an off-site evidence vault, alone, late at night, with only the dull hum of a dying street lamp outside and a code she wasn't supposed to know. She had one chance, one shot to find the proof that something far darker was hiding in that department. She moved fast, every footstep echoing against the concrete floor, her breath tight, her heart louder than her shoes. She found the file, and she found the truth. Frank Miller hadn't acted alone. There were others, 2 more officers whose names had been erased from digital systems, but whose fingerprints were all over the damage. Photos of bruised victims, signatures on dismissed reports, matching stories from years apart. Monica's hands trembled as she snapped photos and stuffed pages into her coat. Then, she heard footsteps. Voices. They were inside. She ran. Down a hallway, out the side door, into the cold air, lungs burning, pulse crashing in her ears. She didn't stop until she reached her car, and even then she couldn't stop shaking. The next morning, her apartment had been broken into. They didn't steal anything. They didn't need to. They just left a message, red spray paint across her wall. "You went too far." Monica sat on the edge of her bed for 2 hours that morning, just breathing, staring at those words, wondering what they would do next. And then, slowly, she stood up, wiped her face, grabbed her bag, and went back to work. Because fear might shake you, but truth steadies you. She handed the evidence over to a federal contact. The investigation expanded, arrests were made, a press conference was held, and slowly, painfully, the system began to shift. Internal procedures were rewritten. Victims were contacted. Files reopened. Apologies issued. For the first time in decades, people who had been dismissed were finally heard. But Monica didn't feel victorious. She felt tired, worn down to the bone. Because behind every policy change there was a price. Her peace, her safety, her family's quiet. She stopped visiting her father because she didn't want him followed. She stopped using social media, stopped going to restaurants, because they were still out there. Maybe not Miller, but others, watching, waiting. She sacrificed more than most people will ever know, and she still shows up. She still answers calls from victims crying on the other end. She still walks the halls of that building. She still investigates new complaints. And she still believes, after everything, that justice is possible. That's what makes her story so painful and so powerful, because Monica Lane didn't just fight racism. She fought silence. She fought fear. She fought the feeling that no one would ever believe her. And she won. Not with fists, not with rage, but with truth. If you've made it this far in the story, I want you to remember this. Behind every brave act is a mountain of suffering you may never say. Monica didn't wake up one day and decide to be a hero. She was pushed. She was broken. She was nearly destroyed. But she rose anyway. She stood when it would have been easier to run. She spoke when it would have been safer to stay quiet. She fought when it felt like no one had her back. And now she needs us. If Monica's story touched you, let her know. If you believe in her fight, show her she's not alone. If you've ever faced injustice and felt like no one would care, this is your moment to stand with someone who did care. Click like, drop a comment, say something kind, say something brave. Let Monica Lane feel your voice, like she gave hers to so many others. Because heroes like her, they're rare, and they deserve to know their story matters. Tomorrow, we share another truth. But today is Monica's. And may her story never be forgotten. Monica Lane's fight began with a lie. A lie disguised in a uniform, wearing a badge, holding power. It began with a punch thrown in public, a scream silenced by disbelief, and a room full of witnesses who didn't move. But today, her story doesn't end with that blow. It ends here, with truth standing tall, and silence broken forever. Monica endured what many could not. She didn't just survive the hate, the betrayal, the danger. She transformed it, turned it into evidence, turned it into justice, turned it into change. And now, after months of heartache, fear, and relentless pressure, the truth has fully come to light. After her case made national headlines, after the courtroom verdict delivered accountability, after the dark underbelly of the police department was exposed, Monica didn't stop. No, she kept going. Even after her apartment was broken into, even after being followed at night, even after her own family begged her to stop, just for a little while, to rest. She couldn't, because she knew, if she stopped, the lies would start again. The files would go missing. The people in power would quietly close the door. And the next, Monica might never get her chance to speak. So she kept showing up. She helped create the department's first independent review board, an outside panel that included civilians, legal experts, and community members. She trained officers on implicit bias and racial trauma, even while some of them refused to look her in the eye. She sat in church basements and town halls, listening to people who had once been afraid of the badge, but now saw her as a bridge. She rewrote policies, pushed for oversight, fought for funding for body cameras, for trauma counseling, for justice reform. And slowly, the culture started to shift. Not all at once, not in sweeping cinematic moments, but piece by piece. A veteran officer pulled her aside one day and said, "I didn't get it before. I do now. I was wrong." A teenager who once feared calling 911 wrote her a letter. "You made me believe cops can care." A family she helped during the investigation sent her a framed photo of their late father, whose case was finally acknowledged, with a note. "He can rest now, because of you." These weren't headlines. These were human moments, and for Monica, they were everything. But the most powerful moment came quietly, in the back of a courtroom, almost a year after the incident. A young black woman named Tasha, barely 20, had filed a complaint after being racially profiled and handcuffed by officers while walking home from work. Monica wasn't assigned to the case, but she showed up anyway, sat in the back, watched. When Tasha walked out of the courtroom, eyes red, hands shaking, Monica stepped forward and said gently, "You did good. You told your truth. That matters." Tasha looked at her, then whispered, "I only did it because of you. I saw your story. I thought, if she could survive that, maybe I can speak up too. That moment? That was the victory, not the conviction, not the press conferences. That. Inspiring someone to fight when they thought they had no fight left. Monica Lane will never forget that. She doesn't walk through the world the same way anymore. She still glances over her shoulder. She still locks her doors twice. She still keeps backup copies of every report, but she walks with peace. Not because the world is fixed, but because she knows she helped bend it in the right direction. And now that her story comes to a close, we want to tell you something. This wasn't just a story about police corruption. It was about courage, about standing up when it hurts, about refusing to be silent, about choosing justice even when the cost is unbearable. And maybe, in some way, this story was about you too. Because somewhere in your life, you'll face your own version of injustice. Maybe not from a police officer, maybe not in a courtroom, but in a boardroom, a classroom, a family gathering, or a place where you're made to feel small. And in that moment, you'll have a choice: stay silent and stay safe, or speak up and spark change. Let Monica's journey remind you that doing the right thing may cost you, but not doing it may cost someone else even more. That fear can walk beside you, but it doesn't have to control you. That no matter how deep the system seems, one voice can shake it. That truth, once spoken, doesn't go away. It echoes. It spreads. It grows. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: courage is not the absence of fear. It's moving forward anyway. And now, we ask you to move forward with us. If Monica's strength moved you, if her journey inspired you, if you found yourself holding your breath, clenching your fists, or wiping away tears, click the like button. Do it to show Monica that her pain meant something. Do it to show every silent victim that people are listening. Do it to remind the world that bravery like hers matters. And please, leave a comment below. Share what you felt. Share what you learned. Share a moment where you had to stand up, or just say, "Thank you, Monica." Because heroes aren't looking for praise, but they deserve to know they're not forgotten. And if this story stayed with you, if you want to hear more stories that expose injustice, that celebrate bravery, that speak the truth, subscribe to this channel. Tomorrow, we'll bring you another story. But for now, let's sit in this one. Let's honor what Monica endured. Let's remember the blood on the lobby floor, the silence that followed, the truth that rose, and the woman who refused to stay down. Monica Lane walked into the belly of a broken system and walked out with her dignity, her mission, and her soul still intact. She didn't just seek justice, she became it. And that is a story worth remembering forever. Like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you again tomorrow with another voice, another fight, another truth. But tonight, we end with Monica, the one who stood alone, so others never had to again.